Hey future RBTs! Today I'm going to be doing an interactive lesson with you on how to study for your competency assessments. I'm going to be going over tasks 1 through 5. I'm also going to be showing you the document you need to study from. Let's get started. To find out what you need to study from for your RBT competency assessment, you're going to choose your web browser and then you're going to go to a search engine. This is Google. Right, so on Google, if you go to Google, you can type in RBT Competency Assessment, and you're gonna click on the first one right here, the first link. And then it's gonna take you to this here, to this PDF, and it might not look like it has what you need to study at first glance, but if you continue scrolling down, you're gonna see the competency assessment form. This is the form that the BCBA or BCABA is going to use to conduct your competency assessment. They're going to ask you questions on each and every one of these things. Don't think it's just going to be a few. They're going to go through all 20 tasks and you need to get them all correct. And that's what I'm here for. I'm going to show you now what you need to know. I'm going to show you now what you need to know for measurement and assessment. I'm providing you here with the study guide for our lesson. This is everything I go over in the lesson. It's written in the exact same way. The only difference between having this study guide and watching the lesson is that in the lesson I show you how measurement and how assessments are used in ABA. I go a lot more in depth in how assessments are used in ABA rather than how measurement is used in ABA, because assessments, they're something that it's more involved than measurement. Measurement is very straightforward, but assessments is not straightforward. It's the opposite, right? It's a little bit more complicated. So, I mean, when you read the definition, it doesn't seem very complicated, but the way that we use it, and you'll see throughout the lesson, it's more complicated. So I would suggest, if you don't have time to watch the whole video, maybe fast forward to when I'm discussing assessments and listen on how you would use a preference assessment in ABA. Because for your competency exam, your BCBA is not going to just ask you what things are. They want to know if you know how to do it. And that's what I teach you as I'm doing the study guide with you throughout the lesson. So if you want to know how these things are used in ABA and not just simply what they are, keep watching. This is going to be a competency assessment study guide. Right? That's what I'm trying to do for you. Study guide, or what? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do for you. This is going to be a competency assessment study guide. And like I said in the introduction, we're going to be going through tasks 1 through 5. Tasks 1 through 5 includes measurement, the different kinds, and assessment. So when you take your competency exam, you need to know the different kinds of measurement. The behavioral analyst is going to ask you, what is continuous measurement and what is discontinuous measurement? And here they also say data and graphs. They might ask you for data and graphs. We're not there. I mean, I'm going to start here with continuous measurement, but for data and graphs, they might ask you, what's the most common graph used in ABA? And that's probably the only thing they'll ask you about data and graphs. I'll go over it again once we get there. But let's start with continuous measurement. continuous measurement. I'm going to highlight this so that you can see the divide between the title and what we're doing. So continuous measurement. For continuous measurement, we have frequency. This is an easy one. Frequency is counting. All right, so how many times did the behavior, and I'm just going to put BX for behavior, did the behavior occur? And then we have duration. That's another easy one. Duration is length of time behavior occurred. So I'll write it in another way. How long did the behavior occur? Did the behavior occur? Now, this one's a little bit more confusing. We have latency. Latency is the time between you give your SD, and an SD is a discriminative stimulus. So the time that you give maybe a demand or a command, the time between your command or your demand and when they respond. That was a lot of words. So it's the time between you tell the learner to do something and when they actually respond. So I'll write here time between just to make it really simple, between your question or demand and I have to do this, and when the learner responds. And then you have IRT, which is actually, I'll just write it out and then I'll put that in an abbreviation. You have inner response time, because your behavioral analyst might want you to know what IRT is abbreviated for, right? What is it actually? What is the whole word? So it's inner, I would imagine it's spelled like this, inner response time, which is IRT. Inner response time is the time between two consecutive behaviors. So two consecutive behaviors, meaning two behaviors that are the same. So the time between two, I'm going to write it like this because that's how you would say it. The time between two I don't think that's how you spell it. And guys, I'm a terrible speller. I'm a great reader, and for some reason, I think it's because of Word. I think it might be like this, consecutive. That's not how you spell that. Let me look it up. Give me a second. I want to spell, I think it might be, it's a C, right? Consecutive, right? I think that's how you do it. I think it's because of word processor, where when we write, yeah, it's like that, consecutive. When we write, and then there's just this automatic, spell check, and then it just does it for you, and you never really learn how to spell. I'm a really bad speller. So time between two consecutive behaviors. So I'm going to give you an example here. Let me think. So let's say that your learner often claps his hands, right? Sometimes there are kids with autism who they like to clap their hands. So how long is the time between the first time he claps and then, or she claps, and the second time she claps? So for an example, you would just put how long between one instance of clapping and another. And then there is rate, which didn't say it there. It doesn't say it here on the competency form, but you do need to know that rate is the it's like duration. Rate is how long rate is how long so rate is how long did a behavior occur within an interval. That's rate. How long did a behavior occur within an interval? So for example, if you have a learner who bites their lip, and let's say you took frequency on this, so you counted how many times they bit their lip. They bit their lip 15 times. Okay, did they bite their lip 15 times in an 8-hour session that you had with them? Like, was that for the whole day? Like, throughout the whole day, did they bite their lip 15 times? Or did they bite their lip 15 times within 2 minutes? That's rate. So let me go here so you can see it better. And we'll do this. We will do I just want you to be able to see it better. Frequency, duration, latency. And then we have inner response time, IRT, rate, and then I will highlight the example right here. Here's an example. Okay, so that is all continuous measurement. Now we have discontinuous measurement. That's a terrible D, but discontinuous. Here we go. Continuous. Sorry, again, terrible speller. Discontinuous measurement. So there are 3 kinds of, and I'll do this in a different color. There are 3 kinds of discontinuous measurement. There is whole interval. I'll just tell you all of them now. There's whole interval, partial interval, and momentary time sampling. So here we have whole interval. Whole interval is when, it's exactly what it sounds like. When you take data for an entire interval. An interval is a set amount of time. So your behavior analyst might say, observe your learner for 7 straight minutes and see take data for 7 minutes on how many times they engage in clapping or lip biting. I want to see how many times it happens in 7 minutes, right? So that would be whole interval. And then there is partial interval. So partial interval is when you might have an interval of 7 minutes, but you're taking data in those 7 minutes for 2 minutes. So, and this doesn't really happen a lot in ABA. I was in RBT for 2 years and we never really ever did discontinuous measurement. Discontinuous measurement, really, you only really ever take when the behavior happens so frequently that you can't get a good count on it. You can't count it reliably because it's happening it's happening an insurmountable amount of times that you can only take it in intervals. So partial interval is when you take data for only part of an interval. And then momentary time sampling. In my time as an RBT, the only discontinuous measurement data I took was momentary time sampling. So I'll write it here. Momentary time sampling. Momentary time sampling is, did the behavior occur at the end of an interval? Remember, and I'll put it here, an interval is a predetermined set of time. So 2, 5, 10 minutes, right? So it could be, and it could be anything, right? It doesn't have to be 2 or 5 or 10, it could be 30, it could be whatever. So did the behavior occur at the end of an interval? Often in momentary time sampling, when you're taking data on it, you're more than likely going to be taking data on a online platform, like an online data collecting platform. And for momentary time sampling, they're like the platform will have the interval. You can, like, the analyst is going to do it, right? They're going to put in interval, like a timer basically, and that timer is going to prompt you, right? It might ring or something, and then you're going to look at your learner and see if they're engaging in the behavior that you need to monitor for momentary time sampling. So for lip biting, the behavior analyst might put it on momentary time sampling, and they might put a 5-minute timer on, and when that timer rings, you need to look and see, are they doing that behavior at the end of 5 minutes? And if they are, you would mark it plus, or you would mark it check mark or plus or whatever. And if they're not, then you would put minus. I hope that makes sense. And so now I'm gonna go back here and I'm going to color code this for you so that you can see it better. Whole interval partial interval, momentary time sampling. I want you to see that. I'll take pictures and upload it so you can see it at the end. And then here, what I'd like to do is kind of put a red box around this so that you know what an interval is. This is kind of important. And we'll do a little red star over that. Okay, so that's discontinuous measurement. And you need to know the difference. You need to know the difference between continuous measurement and discontinuous measurement. And your behavior analyst might ask you, when would you use continuous measurement and when would you use discontinuous measurement? And like I said, you'd probably only use discontinuous measurement when a behavior is harder to track. So then you would have to track it in intervals. That's it. And then for here, task number 3, it's data and graphs. They're not gonna expect you to know, like your analyst is not gonna, they're not gonna expect you to know much about graphs. And as an RBT, I mean, I looked at a lot of graphs as an RBT, especially in my second year as an RBT. But I think the only thing they want you to know when you get to task number 3 with your analyst is what is the most commonly used graph in ABA. This is probably what they're going to ask you. And of course you're going to say, and I know you know this, of course you're going to say line graphs. So data and graphs, we will put that in yellow, or we're going to highlight it here. Right, data and graphs. What is the most commonly used graph in ABA? And you would just say line graphs. For data, they might ask you, I don't think they'd ask you this, but if they ask you, why do you have to collect data? You're going to say, because RBTs need to collect data so that we can measure the behavior, right? We can't measure the behavior and we can't make any intervention on the behavior if we don't know how many times, if we don't have any form of measurement on the behavior. We collect data to measure behavior. If we don't measure behavior, then we can't intervene, right? We wouldn't know what to do without data. We need data so that we know, so that you would know, the behavior analyst, you need data so that you know what interventions to do, what interventions need to take place. So I'll write that down for you, right? I don't think they would ask you this, but if they say, why is data collection important, right? Why is data collection important? You would say something like, because with accurate data, you as the analyst can I'm trying to think of the best way to write it, can choose the best intervention for the behavior, right? Something like that. Can choose the best intervention for the behavior. Or behaviors. Right. So, but I really don't think that they're going to ask you this. I would probably bet a lot of money that they're going to ask you what is the most commonly used line graph in ABA versus why is data collection important. But I don't know. Maybe they would ask you that. I don't think I've ever. I've never been asked that. I think they just assume you know why it's important. But if you didn't know why it was important, now you know. You know, you need to collect accurate data so that you guys can help, and you guys can help your learner in the best way, right? That's why accurate data is really important, because if you're not taking data accurately, the behavior analyst is probably going to use an intervention that they shouldn't be using. So let's go on, because the data is skewed or just not correct. So let's go on to assessment and preference assessments. So preference assessments you would do as an RBT to find what is going to motivate, to find a tool or a toy, what's going to motivate your learner to learn, right? That's why we do preference assessments. And you don't have to wait for your behavior analyst to tell you to do a preference assessment with your learner when you're an RBT. If you find that your learner is becoming satiated on a reinforcer, meaning that it's not very motivating for them anymore, and you don't know what to motivate them with anymore, you would do a preference assessment. And there are different kinds of preference assessments. So let me write here. Oh, I don't know what happened there. Let me write here assessments, because we're moving on to task number 4. I think this is task number 4. Assessments. I'm going to do this in blue again. And the first assessment I'll go over is free operant. A free operant preference assessment is when the learner explores different potential, that came out terrible, but different potential reinforcers. So they might be in an activity room where there's toys and things like that they might like, and what you're doing is observing them, and you're also collecting data duration. You're collecting data on duration for how long they're engaging with the toy. So I'll write here, during a free operant assessment, preference assessment, the RBT, oh my goodness, the RBT must collect data on how long the learner engages with the reinforcer. So the idea with this is that the longer your learner engages with a reinforcer, then the more motivating that reinforcer is for them. Now, you have to have discernment. Maybe I'll talk about this after, I'll get more into this after I tell you all about the different preference assessments. But you have to have discernment with your learner, or you have to know your learner, and you have to have discernment on which preference assessment you're going to use when you want to find something new to motivate them. Because there might be some children with autism that they might go to the first thing, and if you're doing free operant, right? Let's say this is a learner, they go to the first thing, they pick it up, and they're engaging with it for 20 minutes, and they don't put it down. And then you may take it, and they might go to, which normally you wouldn't, you would wait for them to put it down and see if they go to the next thing. But there are some learners who, they find the first thing they see, and then they don't let it go. And it's like that for every single toy or whatever. It's like that for everything they pick up. They're really into it, they don't let it go, whatever. And that doesn't necessarily mean, it could be probably, maybe everything is very motivating for that child, but it's not, it wouldn't, a free operant assessment wouldn't be a good assessment to do for a child who engages for a really long time with everything that they pick up. Like maybe they have visual SSB, right? Maybe they stimulate visually on everything. So everything they pick up, they put it really close to their eyes, and they're just looking at it, and they're engaging with it with a really long time. And that's obviously something that's really reinforcing for them. When they put it close to their eyes, it makes them feel good, whatever, they're stimulating on it. So, and it's for everything they pick up, they're gonna put it really close to their eyes. So doing a free operant preference assessment wouldn't make sense for that child, because they're not going to explore. So if you have a learner who is not going to explore, you're not going to do this preference assessment. So you have to have discernment on which preference assessment you're going to use. After free operant, there's one called paired choice. The way I learned it was forced choice, but in the field I learned that paired choice sounds nicer, so we do it like this. There's a negative connotation when you say forced choice, even though you're not forcing the kid to make a choice. So whatever, we call it paired choice. And paired choice is when you present your learner with two different potential reinforcers, and tell them to pick one. Or you might just say point or something like that. Or you could just put it in front of them and they see what they grab, because they might not have receptive skills. So when you tell them pick one, they might not know what they don't have receptive skills, so they don't understand what pick one means. So you might just see which one they go for, which one they grab. And you don't have to do, paired choice doesn't necessarily have to be exclusively for a preference assessment. Let's say that you always want to give your learner choices throughout session, right? Especially when you're pairing with them. So, but giving learners choices throughout session gives them a sense of control. So if your learner is higher on the, or I don't want to say higher on the spectrum, but if your learner can choose what they want to do first, like what program they want to, what program to run first, like, do you want to do letters first, or do you want to work on shapes first? If they can discern between letters and shapes, then ask them, just be like, what do you want to do first today? and give them the choice. And that's the same thing as a paired choice. But you would also do it with reinforcers, and you would tell them to pick one. And, again, you have to have discernment when you're doing preference assessments. And if your learner there are some learners where you're going to present two things in front of them and they might just grab both. They don't know how to make a choice. So you're not going to do this assessment. You wouldn't do this assessment. So again, have discernment, make sure you're doing the right preference assessment, you're choosing the right preference assessment. You need to know your learner. Don't do a preference assessment that they're not going to know how to do, or that they can't really engage in. Not know how to do. I don't want to do a double negative there. I don't mean to say that they don't know how to do it, but I mean to say that don't do a preference assessment that your learner can't fully engage in because they don't have the skills yet to do it. So after paired choice, here comes multiple stimulus with replacement. Oh, that's not gonna fit. Okay, multiple stimulus with replacement. So multiple stimulus with replacement is when, I didn't get to do my little dots over there, but is when, okay, so multiple stimulus with replacement is, I guess we can't say when. So when the RBT presents the learner with an array of possible reinforcers, and the one that they pick out of the array, and usually obviously the array is going to be 3 or more, because if not, it's a paired choice. So the one that they pick from the array is going to stay in the array, and the ones that they didn't pick are going to be replaced. So that's a lot of words again. So when the RBT presents the learner with an array of possible reinforcers, the learner chooses one and the one they don't choose, the others that are not chosen are replaced. And what are they replaced with, guys? They're replaced with other reinforcers. I'll write it down for you. Are replaced with other potential reinforcers. Right? So that's multiple stimulus with replacement. And then there's multiple stimulus I'm going to do it like this, without, and I'll do it here so I can do my little dots, without replacement, which is the same. So there's going to be an array again. So when the RBT presents the learner with an array, again, it's going to be 3 or more, with an array, and they choose, so when the RBT presents the learner with an array, the learner is going to choose the learner chooses from an array, or from the array, so the learner is going to choose from the array whatever reinforcer. You're gonna let the child play with it for maybe a few seconds, a minute or two, and then you're gonna take it and you're gonna remove that item from the array. And then you're gonna see what they pick next. So when the RBT presents the learner with an array, the learner chooses from the array and then removes item learner chose and continues to observe. Oh, and it would be, oops. I'm sorry, this wasn't written well. So the learner chooses from the array, and then I want to put U, and then the RBT removes the item and continues to observe Oh, I think my pen is dying. Observe, oh yes, observe, and continues to observe which item the learner chooses next. So this is a good one because it shows you, it's a good way of seeing your learner's hierarchy of reinforcers. So with this preference assessment, with multiple stimulus without replacement, with this one you're gonna know what your learner likes from the items that you chose to present to them, what they like most to least. And you're gonna be able to, so when you know what they like most to least, when you do a trial with them and they do it flawlessly, you're gonna motivate them. We're gonna motivate them with the, well, okay, so you're gonna reward them, right? You're gonna reinforce, so you're not gonna motivate, you're gonna reinforce them with their most preferred reinforcer. And if they don't do it flawlessly, let's say they just refuse to do it, or maybe they did it but they didn't do it. Let's say maybe they gave you a hard time to do it, but then they did it anyway. You're not gonna reinforce them with their most preferred reinforcer. You might reinforce them with their third or fourth preferred reinforcer because they had a bad attitude about doing the trial in the beginning. And of course, you need to keep in mind, I'm thinking about that one. So when I say that, I mean more for like a 10, 11-year-old child with autism. You need to keep the kid's age in mind, right? Because a 2-year-old might give you a bad attitude, but if a 2-year-old is sort of, or a 3-year-old is giving you a hard time to do a trial, but they're not tantruming and they're not engaging in any maladaptive behaviors, they're kind of just, you know, being defiant in a very non-violent way. I mean, you'd probably give them their second, you're not going to give them their most preferred, but you'd probably give them their second preferred reinforcer, you know, because they're younger, they're smaller, so their brain development, it's not all, the way the brain is different, obviously, from 2 to 10, right? So, and this is, you also have to keep in mind where your learner is. You need to know your learner, so where your learner is on the spectrum. But this is the hierarchy, this shows you their hierarchy, and this is a really good one to do if you want to know what they like most to least from only the array that you give them, because they might like a lot of things. They might like a lot of things, and it's only their preferences among the things that you showed them. It's not all, it might not be all of their preferences. Of course, if your learner has a limited amount of preferences, a limited amount of interests, so let's say your learner likes cars and blocks, and I'm not sure, cars, blocks, and toy guns, maybe you can put them together in an array and see which one they would pick between the array, and which one they pick might be the one that they like the most. However, reinforcers are very fluid, meaning that maybe for one learner, they might really like a toy gun one day, and then the next day you're gonna have a session with them, and what they really want are the blocks that day. So it depends. This is really fluid, this changes a lot, and you should be doing preference assessments every so often, just so you can always, so that your learner is always motivated to work with you and is always reinforced in the best possible way, and in a way that they deserve, really, to be reinforced, right? You want to be reinforced with something you really, really like. And, you know, even for us, we like things, we may like something one day, especially like gamers, you know, like if you like playing games, well, sometimes you might like, you know, maybe one day you want to play 2K, and then another day you want to play Call of Duty. And let's say that your mom says, do you know, clean your room and then you can play 2K, and you're like, I don't, and then that might not be reinforcing for you that day. You know, you might say, I don't want to play 2K, I want to play Call of Duty. And then she doesn't even give you that option, you know. So are you going to be motivated to clean your room that day? Maybe a little bit, because you like 2K, but if you really want to play Call of Duty, you might clean your room. You know, your room might look immaculate, you know. So these are things you have to keep in mind when you're doing preference assessments. So what comes after here? What's task number 5? Okay, ABC data. ABC data collection. Okay. Oops. Why does it do that? All right. Over ABC data collection. All right, I'm gonna tell you this straight. You're not gonna collect ABC data. It's not gonna be something that you, I don't know. It was never, in the 2 years I was in RBT, this was never something I wrote down. I did for my notes, which I'm gonna do I'm gonna do a video on SOAP notes and also an interactive lesson on how to write a SOAP note. You do want to write your SOAP note in ABC format. That's the best way to write a SOAP note. But you're not gonna write down ABC data, at least I didn't in the 2 years that I was in RBT, as you're collecting frequency data and duration data and things like that. So ABC data, you may already know if you've come across this video that A is for antecedent, and antecedent means, I want to kind of do this. Antecedent is what happened, you probably already know this, what happened just before the behavior occurred. And when you're thinking about the antecedent, you need to think about, always keep in mind the environment, right? B.F. Skinner, the father of behavior analysis, was really gung-ho about our environment and how our environment it's so, but environment is spelled with an N, right? But I don't think you pronounce the N. So B.F. Skinner really cared about the environment and how our environment influenced our behavior. So when you're thinking about the antecedent and a behavior happens and your analyst asks you, okay, but what happened before that? Don't just think about if you're in a center, what another learner did or whatever. Also think about what's happening where you are. Like, where are you? That's a really important thing to consider when you're thinking about the antecedent. And I'll give you an example. I had a learner who, every time we went into the activity room, he was so his behaviors were outside of the activity room. His behaviors were attention maintained, right? They were maintained by attention. And when we would go into the activity room, his behaviors were maintained by escape. So he would engage in behaviors because he wanted to get out of the activity room. And the behaviors were the exact same behaviors he would engage in for attention, but because he was in the activity room and I knew my learner, right? At that point, I'd known him very well, and I knew that he was bored with whatever activity we were doing. He didn't like it, whatever. He didn't want to do it. He'd rather be outside the activity. I knew that it was because he was engaging in the behavior because we were in the activity room and he wanted to leave. So that's part of antecedent, right? So antecedent is what is the environment and then what happened, right? So it might be that so what happened, he was, let's say my learner, he went into the activity room, they did circle time, he was fine, but then they put on a learning video that he didn't like. And then he started engaging in all those behaviors, right? So they're saying, okay, so he engaged in those behaviors when the video was put on. But if you don't understand the environment, then you might think that he's engaging in the behaviors because he wants attention in that moment. But I knew him very well, and I knew that when that video turned on, he no longer wanted to be in that room because he didn't want to watch the video, or let's say we were reading him a book, they were doing story time, and he didn't want to read the story. And so now he's engaging in the same behaviors he engages in for attention so that he can escape. So the function is different. So you need to consider the environment when you're thinking about the antecedent and not just what happened, right? Where did it happen and how have you observed your learner in that environment? And how does that environment affect your learner's behavior? So you need to think about that and consider that when you're collecting antecedent behavior or when you're reporting ABC, because ABC data is really something that you're going to report to your behavior analyst. It's really not something you're ever going to write down. Okay, so I really just want you to know that. You need to think about the environment when you're thinking about antecedent. All right, B is behavior, right? What did your learner do, right? What did your learner do? What was the behavior? Behavior is everything that you can see. So I would imagine, I'm just gonna assume you know that behavior is everything you can see. And then C is consequence, right? So then we have C. Consequence. What happened right after the behavior? What happened after the behavior occurred? And so, again, this is not something that you're going to write down, but this is the way that I write SOAP notes. This is the way I was trained to write SOAP notes in my second year as an RBT, and it is a really good way to write SOAP notes. And as an RBT, you need to constantly be observing your learner and the environment and everything that's happening. A lot of RBTs get caught up talking to one another. A lot of RBTs get caught up talking to teachers and stuff like that. Your learner might be eating lunch. Maybe you're eating lunch with them, and at that point you're not observing him, and then he engages in a behavior, and then the antecedent is very unclear because you didn't see what happened because you were eating lunch. So you always need to be observing your learner, even when, let's say that they have like social time and they're like, you're in a center and they're engaging with other kids. You need to see that the way that they're engaging with other kids. Your eyes need to constantly be on your learner so that you can see this ABC data. Because something might happen, it might be a big thing, and your analyst is going to want to know this data. They're gonna want to know the antecedent, they're gonna want to know the behavior, and they're gonna want to know what happened after the behavior. They're gonna want to know the consequence, and they're gonna ask you. And if you can't tell them that, they're gonna be very upset. So, I mean, that sounds really harsh, but they are, right? They expect you to constantly your eyes are their eyes. They're not there with you all the time. You're the one with the child constantly, and they rely on you. Analysts rely on you to collect this data and to always know this and to be aware of what's going on constantly around your learner and the way they're reacting to their environment and things like that. So don't be surprised if your analyst asks you as you're working as an RBT, what was the antecedent, what was the behavior, what was the right? You need to know this. So in the competency assessment, they just want to know that you know that you when they're asking you what is ABC data in the competency assessment, they want you to know like what this is. Right? They want you to know that A stands for antecedent, B stands for behavior, and C stands for consequence. Hey learners, thanks so much for being part of this class. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. If you feel motivated to continue studying, task 6 through 10 is already uploaded, so you can go ahead and watch those lessons. And don't forget to like and subscribe.